Hello and welcome to the first ever pilot episode of Mike and Jeffrey's Den. We're looking to make this show a weekly show and under the format of like your undisputed first take kind of stuff. It's more or less going to be a debate show as best as it can with just the two of us. Which could go off the rails because we don't have a moderator. But welcome, and I know that for most of you, we're probably your favorite in the Young Guns. I mean, I know I love this guy. This guy is my favorite, and I'm even saying that he's my favorite over myself.
You guys do
All
good.
right. Huh?
You guys do good too, man.
All right, man. So the first topic today, let's talk some more in-depth Jim Harbaugh to the NFL. What do you think about this speculation?
Well, I mean, I think it's really interesting because of the fact that last year we had the same discussion with Jim Harbaugh to the NFL. Thought about, maybe getting the Vikings job. It didn't happen for whatever reason. Stayed at Michigan, and now it's happening all over again. But the difference is that there are multiple jobs that are, potentially calling his name. The Panthers and the Colts and the Broncos and whoever else has a job available he could potentially be linked to. I mean, again, it's a tough argument because a lot of people think he wants to win a national championship at Michigan before he makes the leap. But we don't know if he cares enough about that. If he does care, then he could stay at Michigan. But does he even think he can win a national title at Michigan? I don't know either. Because, again, you see what you're having to go up with in college. But there are some good jobs available in the NFL. I mean, the Colts is a good job. I mean, the Panthers, if once Brady's gone, maybe, he could lead them to the top of the NFC South. Broncos are really struggling right now, but, there are decent jobs open. So, there's definitely a chance he could go, but I don't know if it would really benefit him either way to stay at Michigan or make the jump to the pros because it is much tougher to win in the NFL. And, he could, if he struggles, get fired, whereas at Michigan, as long as he wins 10 to 12 games, he's never going to get fired. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he does.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we know he wants to win a Super Bowl. And the whole argument with leaving Michigan is, like you said, he tried it last year. There was either like a verbal deal or there's like some kind of thing in his contract where it's like, okay, I tried the NFL once. It didn't work out. Meaning, tried the interview with the Vikings. It didn't work. Now my focus is all on Michigan and trying to win the national title. And I don't want to go back to the NFL because I don't want to put Michigan in the position of the limbo for recruiting of, will Harbaugh go? Will he stay? Will he go? And I think it was bullcrap to put it in there because then it's like, what are you going to do if an opening, like, let's say, for example, just randomly that Andy Reid retires or wants to move on to another team. So the Chiefs position opens up. Well, the Chiefs are built perfectly for Harbaugh to go in, run his system, and win a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. So I feel like, in my opinion, the wording of testing the waters for the NFL one time, and if it doesn't work, then don't do it anymore is kind of stupid on Michigan's part. I understand you want to keep your man, but if he wants an opportunity at something else, somewhere else, he should be able to take the opportunity if it's given to him. So I think that's why now you're seeing the reports of like, not necessarily will he go, but it's more like who will give him the better pay and the better, because part of it too is like supposedly he wants as much control as you can get. And I don't know, if he was like that in San Francisco or not, but whatever he did in San Francisco, if he wants to go back to the NFL, he needs to do the same thing and have the same mindset because it worked. I mean, you got them to the Super Bowl. Yeah, you choked against your own brother in the Super Bowl, but you got there. And that's something a lot of people can't say. Like you and me will never, unless we somehow get hired on as like the ball kids or whatever, we're never going to be able to say we got to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point with the Kansas City Chiefs because, I mean, if, for instance, like you said, Andy Reid would retire, that would be a perfect position because, I mean, like you said, they're already built to win. None of the teams that are really available at this time are built to win. Even though the Colts is a great job, they're in bad shape right now. And, I mean, if you can get a good quarterback in the draft or free agency or a trade, maybe you could turn it around and find a way to win more. But yeah, there's not really a job at this point that Jim Harbaugh could go to and say, hey, I'm going to be able to win a Super Bowl very, very soon. You think he would want a job where he would be able to win a Super Bowl maybe in 2 to 4 years instead of maybe it would take 5 years plus to build. Because, I mean, he was only at San Francisco for 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, I just think that, to your point, he needs to go, if he's going to make that jump from Michigan to the NFL, it needs to be for a job that's going to give him a very good chance to win a Super Bowl really quick because really you don't want to downgrade. And I know that the NFL is not a downgrade from college, but you're at the top of the college football world roughly. You might not be Georgia or Alabama, or even though you've beaten Ohio State 2 years in a row, maybe not even at their level for what they've done the last 10, 15 years, but you're at a really top in college. And I think if you're Jim Harbaugh, you should make the jump to the NFL for a team that's way better than Michigan, a better situation than Michigan where you're going to be able to win, the more important prize, which is the Super Bowl over the national championship, which they're both fantastic. But any of these jobs that are available right now, I don't know if that he can achieve that, especially very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, like if you look at the main three options, I mean, Denver seems like maybe if they get the right coach and get the right system to go around Russ, but that's almost toxic in itself because you're hearing things about like, well, Denver kind of wants to move on from Russ. They kind of see the mistake that they made getting Russ, but you got him. You got him for the contract you gave him. So you just need to deal with it because you're making him look and sound to the point that like nobody else is going to want to take him from you anyway. Maybe the Browns, but I mean they are notorious for making stupid decisions, and that's why I say that. And that's coming from the Browns fan. But I mean, of the three options, I like Indy for him just because he did play at Indy. So now you're basically, instead of a Michigan man, now you're an Indy man. I mean, if you want to look at it that way, go that route. But I think it's almost neck and neck as far as if he would leave now. The two biggest options of like who is built and ready to win now, or like you're just missing a couple pieces and you just need to pick them up either in free agency after the drafts, or you can pick up pieces in the drafts, would be Indy and Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I harp on him a lot. I do. But Sam Darnold is decent. I don't know if he's built good enough to run a Harbaugh system. Granted, John O'Corn ran the Michigan system pretty well under Harbaugh. So that's why I'm like, if Harbaugh comes to Carolina, you could probably do pretty good with Sam Darnold at that. you wouldn't necessarily need to get a replacement quarterback and kick Sandy the curb. But I mean, the biggest thing with Indy that is a disadvantage compared to um, Carolina is the quarterback position, because you've got Matt Ryan, the old man Matt Ryan, who was about ready to sign up with AARP at quarterback. And yes, Matt Ryan's great. He's It's probably going to take him a few times, but I guarantee he's probably going to get to the Hall of Fame. Like, he's not like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. He's not no first ballot, no Drew Brees. But he's on the back nine of his career, so to speak. He's about, I would almost say he's like at the 15 to 18 hole range, that like last 3 or 4 holes. So the key with Indy is, if you want to draw Harbaugh in, you've got to convince him with, like, here's who we're thinking to get from the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And see if the quarterback that you want to get is going to draw him in. The other outlier to me that seems like maybe it would be a good fit would be Chicago, because Justin Fields is just crazy nuts. That dude is on fire. The other thing is, there was, and this kind of connects too, but there was rumors coming into the season, like, if Justin doesn't produce like 6 wins, more wins than last year at least, Chicago would move on from him. So maybe we see something where it's like, okay, we know Justin went to Ohio State, we know you coached Michigan and you coached against Justin. What if we're the Indianapolis Colts? What if we get Justin to come to Indianapolis and play for the Colts? You can come in with a quarterback who knows how to run that kind of system. Like, it doesn't bother me with that factor. Because we're trying to look at it from what would be the best fit for Harbaugh to go to the NFL, is the standpoint we're looking at. So if you bring a quarterback like Justin into Indy, I feel like he could run the Harbaugh system pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to your point, I mean, the problem with the Colts is that since Andrew Luck retired, you look at the players that they've had. Carson Wentz, he was, injury prone, very inconsistent and not very reliable overall. He made a lot of mistakes. And then they brought in Phillip Rivers, and you've got Matt Ryan, and both of them are at the tail end of their careers. And Russell Wilson, to a lesser extent, I'm not saying he's at the end of his career. He's got more years left, obviously, than Matt Ryan, but he's not playing at the level that he used to. Even when he was at Seattle, he wasn't playing at the level he used to, and he was getting hurt more often. Not this year. He kind of got banged up toward the end of the season. But I just don't know if Denver, even with Russell Wilson, would be a great spot, because I don't know if he's going to ever play at the level that he did 5 years ago. Maybe he could with Harbaugh. Maybe he could get it all fixed, but he's just not playing at that high of a level. That's why the Seahawks got rid of him. And then you look at the Colts. I mean, again, they're going to have to get another quarterback. He's not going to be able to do it with Matt Ryan. So he's going to have to get another quarterback. To your point, maybe Justin Fields would come over to the Colts, or maybe they can draft a quarterback. Who knows? But like what you said, if you look at those 3 openings, if Harbaugh was to take a spot, even though the Colts is the most logical option because the closest currently is, he played for the team, has all those connections, the Panthers actually is probably the best option, because Sam Darnold is a competent quarterback. He's a young quarterback. He's got many years ahead of him. He can run the football. He's not elite at all, and he does make mistakes. I mean, he's definitely not a top half quarterback in the NFL, but you look at the Panthers' defense, it's elite. Their defense is really, really good. They have great players on that side of the ball, and their offensive line has improved. And even getting rid of Christian McCaffrey, their running game was really solid at the end of the season for the most part. And they've got a lot of draft capital in the future. So, I mean, really, even if he went to the Panthers and Sam Darnold did not work out, all then you would need is a quarterback, and you'd be fine. So I don't think that the Colts are as easy of a fix as the Panthers. I think that he could fix the Colts. I mean, because again, he has a lot of love for the organization, the fact that he, you know, played there, but I think he could fix it. But the Panthers is probably the easiest job at this point of the three because of the fact Brady's not going to be at the Bucs forever, and the other two teams, the Saints and the Falcons, are really struggling right now. So I don't think, if I had to guess, I would think that Harbaugh stays at Michigan. But if he was to take an NFL job, I would probably say the Panthers have a slight edge just because of the chance to win. But probably he would take the Colts if he did take a job. He would probably take the Colts, but I would not be surprised if he waits another year for a better opening.
I was gonna say, if he does stay at Michigan, do we see him wait it out until an opening? Like I said, Chiefs, maybe Belichick's on. Belichick is not going to be at New England forever. Maybe he waits until New England pops open. But the problem with New England, compared to where you're currently not really having the problem at Kansas City yet, is the expectations are really high. And now the only difference is, like, yes, he's met the expectations in Michigan, and Michigan's is usually roughly high. I mean, Ohio State seems to be higher, but point is, he's capable of meeting high expectations. But the reason he left San Francisco, not necessarily because he couldn't, because the job opened at Michigan and he wanted the job in Michigan. I feel like the reason he left San Francisco was the fact that he couldn't win a Super Bowl. He should have won one, and he should have went to two. Because in all honesty, he probably should have beat his brother in that Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. We kind of made it earlier. It just depends on whether his urge to want to win a Super Bowl is that large. I mean, if it is, he's going to go back to the NFL. And if he's content at Michigan, then he'll stay in college. But the fact that the last 2 years he has entertained these rumors to go to the NFL kind of suggests that he eventually will.
Yeah, at this point, it's just a matter of when. Mm-hmm. So with that, we're going to leave that there. Leave it on the table for future discussion. Maybe we'll talk about whether wherever he goes in the NFL is the right choice for him to make wherever he goes when he leaves for the NFL. But so our next topic, we're going to talk about the potential of Tom Brady going to the Las Vegas Raiders, which for most older people is still really weird to say, the Las Vegas Raiders. And when I make a point to say it, it kind of feels weird too. But what's your thoughts on this possible decision?
Well, I mean, for one, I don't really think location really matters, but Tom Brady's always been east of the Mississippi, Michigan, the Patriots, now the Bucs, and it's like now you're going to go all the way to the other side of the country and play for the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Raiders are really struggling, as an organization right now. They've had a lot of issues. I personally think that you're going to have to, as an organization, you're going to have to get Brady to want to come there. You know what I'm saying? Because when he left the Patriots, for the Bucs, he left the Patriots because they weren't giving him the money that he wanted. And I mean, in his mind, he's still a really great quarterback, and he deserves to get paid. And he is. He's still producing great numbers at his age, and that's why he left for the Bucs. And the Bucs had to prove this and say, "Hey, we're going to build around where we have a team ready for you." Because if he went to the Bucs and they were the Bucs of 5 years ago, he would not have gone there. But they had more talent than they used to, and they built around Brady and made it where Brady didn't have a massive drop off, from the Patriots where he was on a bad team. I don't think Brady's going to go to a bad team. So if the Raiders cannot prove to Brady that they have a competent team, he's not going to go. If they have a team that is better than the Bucs, or at least at the Bucs level of talent on both sides of the ball, then I think Brady would entertain it, especially if they pay him more than he's currently making. But they're gonna have to say, hey, we can win a Super Bowl with you, and Brady's gonna evaluate that. He's gonna look at the team. He's not gonna just go over there and say, hey, I'm gonna make the jump to the Raiders because you're paying me a couple more million a year, and we're gonna win a Super Bowl. No, he's gonna look at that team and say, can I win a Super Bowl? If he don't think he can, then he's not gonna go.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to me because this is the kind of thing I think about. It's like people crap on LeBron for chasing rings and playing for three different organizations. Well, if Brady leaves and doesn't go back to the Patriots, that's three different organizations. And to your point, he's not going to want to go anywhere that he can't win a ring within the first 2 years of being there. I mean, he kind of just lucked into the one ring with Tampa in a sense. Yes, he won it. Give him credit for it. But I mean, he, like you said, everything in Tampa was built at the time. It was the right time for him to come in and just fling it around, score touchdowns, and win a championship. It's like it's like he doesn't want a challenge to get the Super. The Raiders would be a challenge for sure, and that's why your point. I don't, because he's so late in his career, and that's why I don't blame him for doing it. Like, your focus is the rings.
Mm-hmm.
Just admit your focus is the rings, and obviously the money. I mean, the money speaks for itself because you're so good. But at this point, you're just a ring chaser because you're so old. You're getting older, and it is crazy to me how good he's doing at his age, because the expected drop off for a quarterback is like 39, 40 years old. I mean, in a way, we're seeing the normal drop off from a quarterback out of Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I know the segment's about Brady, but just as an example, like Aaron Rodgers, 39, 40, and I almost suspect we can make that a segment next week if there's enough speculation. Mm-hmm. I almost suspect that Rodgers is going to retire soon.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, to your point, as you just said, and we, both kind of made it subtly, is that, again, he's not going to be in the NFL much longer. I mean, Tom Brady is overexceeded what anybody ever thought he was going to do, even 10 years ago. No one thought he was going to play this long. No one thought he was going to win a Super Bowl at the age that he just did, 2 years ago. So, that's the thing. I mean, he can't have a rebuild, to your point. It would be a challenge to go to the Raiders and win one. But if he was like 35, 36 years old or something, then he can maybe wait 3 or 4 or 5 years to win one. But Brady's not built that way. Anyway, he wants to win Super Bowl. Since he's won so many, he wants to keep winning them as long as he's playing. But he doesn't have the time for a rebuild. He has to win now, because we don't know when his last year is. I mean, some people thought it'd be this year. Some people thought it would be last year with the whole retirement thing. He's not playing anymore. And then some people still think he's going to play 2, 3, 4 more years. We don't know. But real quick, to your point about Rodgers, I will say the difference between Rodgers and Brady is that Rodgers is more of a mobile quarterback. How he runs around and he does a lot of stuff. Like, I still believe the reason Brady operates the way he does still at his age is because of the fact his arm has not gone away, and that is him. His whole entire game is throwing the ball down the field. You look at the Bucs, and that's a big reason why I think he's very maybe possibly disinterested with the Bucs and could want to go somewhere else, because you look at this past season. If you look at Tom Brady's career, yeah, he can throw the dump offs and the 10-yard passes, but when he was at the Patriots, they won with him throwing 70-yard passes down the field too. And with the Bucs this year, they didn't do that all year long. He was throwing a bunch of short passes. He'd be 30 of 45 for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I mean, that's great, but you're not getting a lot of yards per completion out of that. He played the Panthers 2 weeks ago, and he threw to Mike Evans all game long for 210 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's still capable of doing that for whatever reason, whether it was the offensive coordinator for the Bucs or whatever. They were not throwing the ball deep. He is still capable of that. And you need to allow Brady to do what he wants and what he can do. I mean, if his arm was not capable of it anymore and he didn't have the arm to get the ball down the field and he was throwing picks, and I can see why you'd not want him to do it, but he's still capable of slinging the ball down the field. And that is his game. He does not have any running ability. It's just throw the ball down the field, let the receiver catch it. So the only way that I could see him being potentially disinterested with the Bucs is because they didn't really allow him to do that this year for whatever reason enough. And the only reason they're in the playoffs right now is because they did it against the Panthers. And I think that wherever he goes, whether he stays with the Bucs or wherever he goes, he needs to be able to throw the ball down the field like he can, because that's what he's best at. And if he wants a chance to win another Super Bowl, he's going to have to do it in the next couple of years, because he's not going to be able to be in the league too much longer. So that's why potentially he's looking at other places. I just don't know if the Raiders is it. Maybe it is, but
I mean, I feel like the Raiders have.
for the Raiders. The problem with the Raiders, their defense is terrible, and you're not going to be able to win games if your defense is that bad. Because, I mean, a lot of people did not like Derek Carr, said he was terrible, and yeah, he is not one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But in his defense, the Raiders would lose a lot of games 35-31. Brady's won a lot of games in his career in a low-scoring game that he had to lead him down the field one extra time to win. The Raiders' defense is awful, and that's why, again, I think he's going to evaluate. If he's potentially looking at the Raiders, he's going to evaluate the Raiders, and if he sees that that defense is that bad, he's not going to go there, because he's not going to have a chance to win a Super Bowl.
Right. I mean, I think the Raiders have shown, whether it's Brady or not, they're ready to move on from Derek Carr when they benched him. I know the segment's about Brady, but the reason I think it's a possibility to that side of the discussion is the fact that so Derek Carr's not it. I don't think Jarrett Stidham is it, unless you bring someone like Brady in and have him continue to be the backup and learn under Brady for that year or two and just make the proper moves in the draft, or realistically free agency. Because let's be honest, if you bring Brady in, unless his contract's up at the end of this year, which I think it is, which is why you were seeing the possibilities. Basically, if it's where you have to give up draft picks to get him, which I don't think it is, then it's kind of a bad idea to bring him in. But if you're picking him up off of free agency, I would get him, and then I would go in the draft and try to solidify your defense and make it a better defense. Like, who are the defensive guys we got in this draft that fit our system good enough, or like they're just on the verge of they fit the system perfectly, and we just need to have them come in and teach them our system. Because I mean, it's pretty easy to make a good defense, not just the draft, because you also have the free agency period. The thing for me is, like, again, I feel like the Raiders are almost there. They just need to put the right pieces in place as far as getting Brady to come.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll table that for the next time.
That is the absolute key there. I mean, you as the Raiders have to make Brady want to come. That is the entirety of the situation. Because if you can convince him to come, you can prove that, hey, we're going to have a team that you can win a Super Bowl with. I think he would consider it. But if they can't prove to Brady that they have a team capable of it, or will have a team capable in the next year or two, he's not going to do it. Because, again, to both of our points, he does not have much longer in the NFL. It'd be a different situation if he was 10 years younger. But I think I think it is possible because, to your point, the Bucks have underachieved this year, and for a variety of reasons, some injury issues, some of it play calling. And I do think that Brady is entertaining the option to potentially leave. But if the Raiders aren't going to be able to show that they're going to be better than the Bucks, then I don't think he will. But it is possible for sure.
Right. I mean, yeah, we'll just have to. It's a Harbaugh situation all over again. Just kind of have to wait and see what happens. So we'll table that, see where it goes, maybe bring it back up if anything happens. So the next one, I'm sure, is the one that you've been waiting on. The discussion everybody has, I've had them a few times. I struggle in this discussion because everything seems to go against me in a sense. Michael Jordan versus LeBron James. Who is the GOAT?
Yeah, I mean, this argument is it's so interesting because it depends on what you're looking at. You know, you look at Michael Jordan, and one of the biggest, arguments that is used toward him is, again, the flashiness of the way he played, the dunks. Because again, LeBron has his own dunks, but you have like Michael Jordan, the dunks from the free throw line, all the kind of stuff that he was able to do. The era that he played. I mean, you look at the NBA back then. There was so much more fouling back then that wasn't called versus today. I'm not saying the NBA is softer than it used to be, but Michael Jordan took a beating, you know what I'm saying? And he was still able to be as fantastic as he was. I mean, he won all the championships, but LeBron has too. LeBron's won championships as well. The other argument that helps Michael Jordan out is that he missed 3 years in the NBA. If he had to play his whole career through, potentially he would have put up more stats. He maybe would have won another championship or two, possibly, which could have helped him out. But that's not what happened. He played baseball for 3 years. But for LeBron, I mean, the way he's playing right now is helping his case toward being the GOAT per se, because he's 38 years old now, and he's still playing basically almost at the same level he was 10 years ago. I know people say he's nowhere near the same. Okay. If you look at his points per game, it's about the same. I mean, he averaged 30 points per game 10 years ago, and now he's averaging 28. It's a 2 points per game difference. He's averaging more assists now than he used to. He's still rebounding at a high level. Granted, he's on a worse team right now than he was with the Heat back then, where you're not having to share the ball as much because, I mean, the Lakers just aren't as good of a team right now, especially with Anthony Davis always out. But the way LeBron is playing at 38 years old is impressive. Michael Jordan at 38 was not as good as LeBron. And part of that was, some people would argue, is because of the fact the way the NBA was back then, taking a beating. Some people would argue that it has to do because he missed 3 years of basketball and he played baseball, that, I don't know. If he had to play the whole time, who knows how he would have played. And plus he went to an organization, a different one in the Wizards, and Michael Jordan and the Bulls was Michael Jordan and the Bulls. He played his peak basketball at the Bulls, and being on a different team, I don't know. It just wasn't the same. Everything didn't work out. But LeBron, he's moved around as well, and he's still playing at a high level. They're two different positions. One's a shooting guard / small forward in Michael Jordan, and then you got a power forward in LeBron, small forward, power forward, whatever. But he's played both positions. But he's basically a power forward. They're different positions. But the argument for both, they're both valid to be the best player, the GOAT of not college basketball, but the NBA. I mean, because obviously LeBron didn't play in college. That would lean toward Michael Jordan, college basketball, of course, because he played in it. But I would say that they both have the argument. And if someone says Michael Jordan or LeBron, it's both, I would say, correct. They're not really wrong either way. But I would say if LeBron keeps playing the NBA at this high of a level till he's 40, 41, 42 years old, if he's still able to play at this high level, then it could start to lean LeBron's way more.
So, because a lot of people, to your point, say, well, of course, people are going to start saying LeBron because longevity and stat padding, which I think is stupid as far as an argument. When you're somebody that's that good, I mean, is it really stat padding?
Well, I mean, you look at a lot of players that their careers got cut short due to injury. I mean, and then they get devalued in a lot of people's minds because the stats aren't there. But they were great. It's just they got injured. But to your point with the stat padding, I mean, unfortunately, numbers are numbers and people care. I mean, that's why, I know we're doing LeBron versus Michael Jordan, but we had that argument the other day about Ray Allen, and Curry. And a lot of people would say Ray Allen because he didn't shoot as many threes. Well, unfortunately, the way it is Curry's going to get the best 3-point shooter of all time in most people's minds because he's just going to keep shooting, and the stats are going to be so far away that it's not even close. But you could make the argument for Ray Allen because he didn't shoot as much and he was a lights out shooter, and it was a different era of the NBA where you didn't shoot as many threes, whereas Curry's just chunking up 15 a game and making. I mean, the argument is there, but that's why it would be awesome if Michael Jordan and LeBron played at the same time, which will never happen. But if they played at the same time, I think, and Michael Jordan never played baseball, if they played at the exact same time and played the same amount of years, that would be really the true argument of who's better. If LeBron, say, retires at 42, if Michael Jordan had to play all the way till he was 42. And,
So,
same thing, and where you could completely compare them to be even Steven, which one was better. But that's never going to happen.
so the thing that irritates me with the argument is people like the one that we shame all the time, Skip Bayless. His whole thing is, well, it's definitive, and we know if Michael Jordan hadn't left for 2 years to play baseball, that he'd be 8-0 in the NBA Finals and he'd have 8 championships. Well, that's not necessarily true, to your point. Like, I mean, is there an argument for that perspective? Or is it just, we'll never know because it didn't happen?
Well, we will never know, obviously. I mean, there's no way to tell because it didn't happen. But the other argument for Michael Jordan, like I said, is the college basketball thing. He played 3 years of college basketball. And this is where the stat padding comes in as well, because if you combine the baseball time and the college basketball time, LeBron's going to end up being in the league probably 6-7 more years than Michael Jordan was, because LeBron never played in college and LeBron never spent 2 years to play baseball, and LeBron's going to end up playing longer than Michael Jordan. So you add all that together, and again, that's where the stat padding comes in, where LeBron has the numbers that Michael Jordan does not have. But if you could project Michael Jordan, just say he didn't play in college and went straight out of high school, had those 3 years, and you could project Michael Jordan playing all the years of basketball and not being in baseball, and if you could project Michael Jordan playing till he's 40, 41, 42, however long LeBron plays, their numbers would probably be a lot closer.
Then there.
Yeah, they'd be very close. I probably would say LeBron might still have an edge because what he's done is insane with the points and the rebounds and assists, but their numbers will be a lot closer than they are because Michael Jordan just did not have those advantages of the 3 years he played in college. He just didn't come out when he was 18. It was just a different situation back then, and the baseball thing. So that's why LeBron's going to end up probably gaining more and more of the best player of all time in the future because his stats are just going to be so far ahead. But still, to Michael Jordan's argument and defense, is he did miss so many years of time in the NBA due to reasons that it's tough to really say either way.
So, I mean, do you think that it's going to lean or trend to what you're saying, or do you think it's just going to be more of like there's more people alive at a younger age now that have seen only LeBron play than there is that have seen just Jordan play, and that's what makes them think he's the GOAT, or that are older than us, especially me, but fall into that period of I watched Jordan and LeBron play. I mean, do you think that with him being in a time period of where, I played when there were younger people watching and more younger people watching, so that's going to be in his favor, and that's what's going to lead him to eventually be over the hump of I'm the GOAT because more people watched me at a younger age than they did Jordan, and enough of the people that watched Jordan or watched Jordan and me have passed on, so to speak. So people are eventually just going to forget about Jordan outside of the record books.
Well, I mean, that is a great argument. I mean, this could be in the NFL too. I mean, we're not talking about any right now, but you talk about players, you'll hear commentators all the time and say, "Oh, this player was fantastic back in the '70s. I watched them play, because he's an older guy that's commentating." And I mean, nobody's watched that person. He might have been fantastic, but none of us watched him. And you might be able to pull up some grainy YouTube footage, but you're not gonna remember that person watching him on the field. I think that's a valid point. I mean, you could go even further back than Michael Jordan and talk about players like Wilt Chamberlain and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, those kind of players. They were even further back, and they were fantastic players, but there's literally no tape of Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game. I mean, there's no tape of it. Or if there is, it's barely. So, I mean, people don't really give as much credit to Wilt Chamberlain and Kareem because, like, hey, you played at a time where you could just dominate because there was not as many great centers as there are like today where you've got, Embiid and Giannis and Jokic and all these players that are just fantastic, that are tall and, and everything. And it's not as maybe potentially as impressive as what people saw back then when it was just like one or two elite centers doing what they were doing. Whereas today there's just so many of them that are fantastic that it kind of dilutes everything, where you have to be super great to, be the best player in the NBA or the GOAT. I mean, because, you can make an argument right now for 10 players that are the best in the NBA. I mean, there are that many great players. LeBron's in that discussion still, which is remarkable at his age, but there are so many players that are just fantastic. Whereas back then, there weren't as many elite players, and the ones that were great stood out. And I know some people would argue that there were more great players than that, but still, it just seems like right now there are more great players at the top. Whereas back then, it was just Michael Jordan stood above the rest. No one else really was like him. But I don't know. I agree with you though. I think who saw him matters, and because if you talk to a lot of people that are like 40 or 50, they're going to say Michael Jordan, and some of those people don't even watch the NBA anymore for different reasons. They don't even watch the NBA, so it's like you're not going to say LeBron's the best player of all time when you don't watch the NBA anymore, because you don't watch play, and it doesn't matter that he's putting up all the stats because you're not watching it. Whereas someone like me, even though I wasn't alive when Michael Jordan played, I have watched this film. Plays he's ever done, the greatest games. So again, I can see the argument both ways, but there will be a point in a time where a lot of younger people will never watch Jordan's, film or care or whatever. They're just going to pay attention to current players, and that's going to hurt him. But at the end of the day, I really think what people should do is just break down the eras and say who's the GOAT of that era. So if you want to go further than Jordan, you could say Kareem or someone else or something like that. And 80s and 90s is Jordan, and then right now the last 10, 15 years is LeBron, and just break them down to eras. And so you can say there's a GOAT of every era. But at the end of the day, LeBron's probably going to be in the GOAT in the future, because of the fact that he's going to pad the stats. He's played so long, and more people are going to only know him. But I think a lot of more players from different eras deserve credit. And I think Michael Jordan still is a GOAT of his era for sure. And that should never be taken away. But LeBron probably will gain more and more of that in the future. But who knows? I mean, 20, 30 years from now, there could be another insane player that exceeds even all of that. You never know. And then we're talking that he's the GOAT. And again, I would even use the argument then, well, LeBron was the GOAT of his era, 20, 30 years ago. So that's just the way I see it.
Well, and like to your point, it's almost like there seems to be a smaller GOAT discussion finally starting to brew and gain more potential, because I keep hearing, well, at least the past few years, I've been hearing a lot of, is the GOAT discussion really LeBron versus Michael, or is it Steph versus LeBron? Because Steph, in 6 tries, has already matched LeBron's win record in the NBA Finals.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, you don't have as many Finals MVPs, but most people don't look at the MVP portion as heavily between Steph and LeBron as they do LeBron and MJ. And that's the other thing with the actual argument discussion that we're talking about. Okay, why is it that the biggest thing in the argument is how many in that second column did Michael have? He had 0 in the second column in the final. So that automatically makes him better. Like literally, when LeBron lost to the Spurs in 2007 in the finals, there were a crap ton of people. And I don't have to go into who they were because they know who they were. They all work for the freaking big network media people. They said the GOAT debate is over because Michael never lost a finals. So the minute you lose the finals series, you no longer have potential to be the GOAT. My counterpoint to that is, well, did Michael ever go to 10 straight finals, whether or not he lost them? Because LeBron went to like 9 or 10 in a row. I don't think we've ever seen that since like the Celtics back in like the 50s or 60s.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think to your point, going back to Curry, I mean, again, the other argument besides eras is position. I mean, Curry and LeBron are completely different players. Curry is a point guard, and he can shoot the light out of the basketball, good passer, all that kind of stuff. LeBron, he's a power forward. He's dominant. He can dunk, shoot, all that kind of thing. They're not the same position. I don't think you really can't even compare the two, even though to say whether who's the GOAT. I mean, LeBron's got the flashiness of the dunks and stuff, and what he's doing at his age, and Curry's got he shoots the ball like crazy, and I mean he leads a fantastic Warriors team that you've got another shooter in Klay Thompson. That's why they're the Splash Brothers, and you've got a great passing team, and I don't know. I mean, to your point about with the 0 losses and everything with Michael Jordan, the argument is there weren't as many good teams in the NBA back then. That's why he won them all. I mean, that argument's kind of been proven false. There were good teams back then. Maybe there weren't as many good ones. Who knows? But I don't really think just winning finals per se makes you the GOAT. I think it more matters the player that you are. I mean, you see a lot of NFL quarterbacks, especially that never won a Super Bowl, that are better players than quarterbacks that did. Where you have players in the NBA that have never won a ring. I mean, Chris Paul's never won a ring, but a lot of people would say he's way better than a lot of players that have won rings. I mean, how many bench warmers are there that have won multiple rings and they're bench warmers? I mean, that was not to bring this up, but the argument with Danny Green versus Eric Gordon when I was like talking about that. I mean, they're both really good players, but Danny Green's best season averaged 11 points, and Eric Gordon's averaged 20 points several times, and he's never had a season below 10. And a lot of people say Danny Green's better, but because he's got the rings, but he was on teams that he wasn't the primary player. He was the 4th, 5th, 6th best player. So even though the finals are important, again, it's what the player does. And again, the fact LeBron at the age of 38 is playing the way he is fantastic. And Michael Jordan for his era and what he did, it was fantastic as well. They're both great players, and for both eras, they're both GOATs of their era. But again, for what LeBron's doing, he's probably going to end up gaining steam as the guy, for the next 10, 15, 20 years until someone can do even better than that if they can, just because of recency bias and how long he's played in the stats and even all that he's won. But I don't really think per se that the finals Jordan ever lost is an argument. I don't really think that, LeBron should be favored because he played longer. I think Michael Jordan, what he did when he played really matters too. But there are so many different arguments, so many different ways. They're just both fantastic basketball players that played 2 different positions, that played in 2 different eras, and they're both great in their own right. But if you really want to see a GOAT discussion, if LeBron keeps playing the way he is, it's going to probably be him in the national narrative and media, but they're both fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, this is a discussion that everyone's going to have for their lifetime. Because I guarantee you, like I said in the beginning, someone who is like 50, 60 or older probably remembers when Dr. Dre played. So to them, Dr. Dre was the GOAT. And then Michael came along. No, Michael's the GOAT. To your point about like era or decades, there's so many players that fall within that realm that's like, yeah, he could be a GOAT. It's almost like you're looking at it the wrong way. Instead of a GOAT, what if we have like a Mount Rushmore GOAT? Like Mount Rushmore has four heads.
Mm-hmm.
So LeBron would be on there, MJ would be on there, probably Dr. Dre, and then probably Bill Russell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that I don't default to that because like it's a weak argument to defend LeBron for GOAT. I'm just saying, to your point, there's so many great players that stand above and beyond the rest during the time. That's like it's hard to select one definitive GOAT because if you want to talk to your point, yes, championships shouldn't weigh as much as they do. But to your point, if championships is your defense, then Michael Jordan's not the GOAT. Bill Russell's the GOAT because Bill Russell has 11. Well, Bill Russell has the 2 in the second column. Well, it's 11 more than 6 if we're doing the math right. I mean, there are just so many ways you can go about it.
I mean, to your point with Bill Russell, he went 11-2. I mean, if Michael Jordan played in 13, there's probably a really good chance he's not 13-0. I mean, there's really no way you're going to go 13-0. So, yeah, there are definitely so many ways you can slice it. I mean, really, the people argue about Kobe Bryant, and it's like if you didn't have Michael Jordan, then Kobe Bryant probably would have more steam. But it's a lot in a lot of people's minds. Kobe Bryant was Michael Jordan, but more modern era. So he just kind of did what he did after him, and Michael Jordan still maybe was a bit flashier. I don't really know how to explain that because Kobe Bryant shot better than Michael Jordan, and shot more. But like I said, I mean, it's just everything's argumentative. I mean, there's really no right or wrong way to say it. If someone has opinion, depending on what era it is. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, to your point, it just, and I think to my point too, it's a debate that will never end. It's the names of the players are going to change. Like even in our group, like I think LeBron's the GOAT. You said you could go either way between LeBron and Michael. Austin thinks Dirk is the GOAT. Dirk Nowitzki.
Hey, he was fantastic, but I don't know. He was fantastic.
Jackson said Bill Russell, and I never got an answer from Will, so who knows? But I mean, yeah, it all, to our point, it just depends on the person, who they like, who they think is better. Statistics, and that's the problem with the GOAT debate. It's all opinion, which is fine. It can be opinion, but I mean, to your point, you need to look at it factually too. And if you look at it factually, like you said in this segment, LeBron's going to run away with it eventually because statistically, he's played longer, he's played more. To Shannon Sharp's point, every time Skip and Shannon have this debate, if you're talking seasons, LeBron's played enough playoff games to where he's played basically an extra 5 seasons in the postseason alone. But with that said, we can table this for another time, maybe after LeBron wins another title. So the last segment, I'm going to change it up on you. The last segment, I want to talk NFL playoffs. because we got the wild card weekend coming up. So I just want to talk about what we think is the best and the worst matchups for wild card weekend.
Well, I mean, the worst matchup for any team is probably I mean, that then alone, I mean, Cowboys going up against Brady, you feel like that's just the absolute worst possible matchup you could get, because the Cowboys for some reason have a tendency to choke. I don't know why, cuz I mean, we know the Cowboys, they're America's team, right? And I mean, we know what they've won in the past. They've won a lot. But recently, when they make the playoffs, they find a way to lose. And it's like you're playing against Brady. Like, the Bucks have struggled all season long. They have a losing record. They're 8-9. But you're playing Brady as the Cowboys. And you saying the best and worst match, I think that's the worst possible matchup for the Cowboys, unless the Cowboys play like they did against the Vikings, beat them 40-3. I mean, the Cowboys have shown that they're capable, that they can be one of the best NFL teams, beating the Vikings 40-3, but then you lose to the Jaguars and you lose to the Falcons, even if it was the final game of the regular season. It doesn't matter. I mean, you barely beat the Pack. No, you lost the Packers. Sorry, you lost the Packers on the 2-point conversion. I mean, games like that. I mean, if the Bucks play like that, then the Cowboys will win, even if the Cowboys play bad, you would think. But it's Brady. It's the playoffs. You just feel like he's gonna find a way to beat the Cowboys, especially if the Cowboys play a bad game like they've been doing in the playoffs lately.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the worst, I agree 100%. It's got to be Cowboys and Buccaneers. I mean, as of late, to your point, they haven't shown that they can win in the playoff. I mean, I had this discussion with Austin about the Cowboys specifically. I said, you've had better teams within the last 10 years, and they're one and done. They don't even get out of that first game with a win. I mean, prime example, the 16 team with Dak and Zeke, their rookie year, 13-3. They're a 1 or a 2 seed. The Packers come in off the wild card game into Jerry World. You had a chance to win, and you blew it. You end up losing by 3.
I mean, last year they choked. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, on paper, Dallas they should beat the Bucks. And I mean, really, it doesn't really matter who the opponent is, because if you choke, you choke. It just feels like you have a better shot to choke because it's Brady and the Bucks. You feel like Brady's gonna kind of go in beast mode since it's the playoffs, and he's gonna give it everything he's got. I mean, like I said, if the Cowboys play to their potential, they should beat the Bucks. But if they don't, then they won't. Now, I will say another interesting game, since we're talking about the wild card. I think that the Ravens-Bengals could be a really good game if Lamar Jackson plays. But I don't know. I mean, if Lamar Jackson doesn't play, then more than likely the Bengals are going to win that game. I mean, that's just the way it is. But if Lamar Jackson plays and he's healthy and he plays a really good game, that could be a good game.
So you think that would qualify for your most anticipated to watch game, or is there a better one in your opinion?
Again, if Lamar Jackson's able to play, I would probably say that's the best one. I mean, looking up and down, I mean, you got the Seahawks, 49ers. I mean, on paper, the 49ers should win that game. I mean, Geno Smith's had good performances this year, and the Seahawks have at times they've played really well, but they have kind of folded down the stretch. And I know the argument is that this is Brock Purdy. This is his first playoff game. he shouldn't even be playing right now. If you're looking at the depth chart, it should be either Trey Lance or it should be Jimmy Garoppolo, but they're neither available. So, I mean, there is a shot the 49ers could slip up, but they've been playing really well. But there is a shot they could slip up with Brock Purdy, so that could be interesting. The Chargers and Jaguars, that could be a good game too. I mean, you've got two younger quarterbacks in Herbert, and this is, Lawrence's first playoff game. That could be a really good game. The Dolphins and Bills, I mean, if the Dolphins had, Tua and he was playing, it's kind of the same thing with Lamar. I mean, if Tua Tagovailoa plays, then the Dolphins maybe could beat the Bills. I mean, they almost beat the Bills in the snow, up in Buffalo. That was a really good game. But since Tua's, been out with concussion protocol, they're not very good. So if he doesn't play, the Bills will win. But if he does play, there's a shot there. So both the Dolphins, Bills, and the Ravens, Bengals are predicated on whether their quarterback's playing. And the Giants, Vikings, this is kind of interesting as well because I don't think the Giants are a very great team. They made the playoffs, and I'm glad for the Giants that they did because they haven't been in a while. But it really is going to come down to what Kirk Cousins does in the Vikings because they've kind of have that choke factor as well to an extent in a lot of big games. I mean, because Kirk Cousins can light it up, throw for 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and then he has bad games. But since I don't know on the quarterback situation, I will probably say either the Cowboys, Bucks, because I'm really curious to see if the Cowboys are going to choke again or if they can find a way to beat Brady, or the Chargers, Jaguars, because at least both quarterbacks I know are playing, and that could be a really good game. The other two, like I said, it comes down to the quarterbacks.
I'd say for me, as far as most uninterested in, but probably still watch because I mean it's free football. Probably agree with you, Cowboys and Bucks. I mean, everything goes against the Cowboys, like you said. I mean, you're 0-7 against Brady by himself. For one, I mean, literally, if you're going to beat the Bucks, you got to take Brady out, and I mean like Marvin Harrison take out.
Which that would not be good because at least Marvin Harrison, he's a young guy. You don't want that happening to Brady. If you want Brady in the league, then yeah.
Which, and I'm not calling for it. I'm just saying like that's like one of the only ways that you're going to pull this off. It could. There's a chance because it is the 4-5. They're both about equal. They both suck to the standards of
than the other.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying. Usually, like Brady teams are like 3 seed or higher. Usually hovering on 1 or 2. You're gonna have to have Dak dual Brady like they did in the kickoff game a couple years ago. Zeke's gonna have to run nuts. You're gonna have to like do a dual run threat with Zeke and Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard is really good too. Like people praise Zeke earlier, but dude, Tony Pollard, in my opinion, is about just as good, if not slightly better than Zeke.
He had a 1,000-yard season this year too, and he played fantastic. I mean, to your point about Dak, I mean, literally, Dak, you cannot do what you did last week, throwing a pass that should have been picked, and then throw the same pass again, and it got picked that time. I mean, that was, I mean, literally listening to the commentators on that sequence was hilarious when he literally threw the ball and it was almost picked. Should have been picked. And it's like, oh, Dak got away with one there. And then they run the same route and he throws it again and it gets picked. And they're like, I don't think I've ever seen a sequence like if you're Dak, you cannot do that. If you want to beat Brady and the Bucks, you cannot throw any interceptions. I mean, even if you only throw for 150 yards and a touchdown or two, you have a better chance to win than throwing for 300 yards and having 2 or 3 picks. You cannot turn the ball over.
At least prevent the costly turnover. Like if you to people's point, if you throw what do they call that? One of those dump passes where it's like a trips left or right, and the 2 wide receivers that are in front of the one are blockers just because it's a dump pass to the one in the back. If you throw one like that and it gets picked off and nobody's there to stop them, that's a touchdown interception. And you want to prevent that because that's a costly interception. If you don't have the costly turnovers, you can afford to have like one, maybe two interceptions, as long as, to your point, you're countering it with 150, 200 yards, two, maybe three touchdowns. That's about the performance you're going to need out of Zach to even win this game. Or Dak, not Zach. Dak to win this game. To even, or realistically, you're going to need just that to even be close in the game. Because, I mean, there's a big possibility that, obviously, I don't think you or I will, just because it's part of our job. But if it gets out of hand, people are going to get to the point they're going to turn it off like they did Georgia TCU. I don't think it's going to be that bad, but I'm just saying, like, you know, if it gets to the point it's like 28-7 midway through the third quarter, you might as well turn it off, because
if the Bucks beat the Cowboys 65-7, then something is just internally forever wrong with the Cowboys. You cannot, like, most of the time they lose by 3 or 7. They choke. That's what choke is, when you're like winning and then you give the game away. If you're losing 65-7, you might need to just shut down. You know, you don't not play anymore. They're not going to lose 65-7. If the Cowboys lose, it will be a close loss, probably by 3-7 on a game that you look at the stats, they should have won, but Dak threw a pick or two, or you just allowed Brady to get that last drive where he scores and wins the game. That would, to me, be the way they're going to win. And again, the Cowboys would have choked again, but they don't need to shut their organization down. They're good. I mean, it's just another choke job. Get them next year versus can't lose 65-7. I don't think.
I just meant, like, you know, if it gets to a point that it gets NFL out of hand, people are going to turn it off. It's, to your point, it's never going to reach Georgia TCU level. I mean, maybe if it was the Browns against a prime Brady, then maybe that would happen. But and then I would say my most interesting one probably, I will say this. I assume Lamar's playing. I think that's gonna be the one. I mean, it could be Buffalo, Miami, which, you know, that could be a topic for next week about, based on the results, which ones were which. But I mean, I think I'm looking at that like, you know, Cincinnati was good enough to get back to the playoff, and can they make the run again to get back to the Super Bowl? Because the Rams are the defending champs, and they didn't even qualify for the playoffs. They didn't make the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting to see if Lamar can finally get the Joe Burrow Bengals off of his back, that monkey off of his back, win a second playoff game finally. That in itself, like, makes me doubt Lamar, because you've been in the playoffs like 3 or 4 times. You've only won one playoff game. But, I mean, overall, we've got a great week ahead of us, an amazing football weekend. We've got amazing to good NBA games. We got some really great college basketball games coming up. You know, people in the college football world getting ready for pro days, the Senior Bowl stuff, the combine is coming up in the next, month or two? I think in March. But so, I mean, in our world, it's going to be interesting what we see in the near future, the next 3 to 4 months by itself. You know, with things playing out the way they do, it's it's like prime time again for the sports world. A lot of people say it's, football season comes back around, starts to kick back off. that's their prime time. Now it's right now because
Mm-hmm.
it's sports world. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you're leading to the end of the NBA season, head to the playoffs, March Madness around the corner, combine draft around the corner, Senior Bowl, which is basically equivalent to the Pro Bowl. It's a meaningless game to a lot of people, but it's a scouting game for the
Mm-hmm.
NFL. But this has been awesome. Um, started a little late, went a little over, so we made up the lateness. But yeah, this was fun. And I can't wait to do this again next week with you.
I'm looking forward to it too, man. You're absolutely right. This is one of the best times for sports. There's news everywhere, and that's where it's great to talk and cover all these different sports at the same time because you get so many awesome stories. And I'm with you. I can't wait to do it next week.
Everybody tune in. I hope you enjoyed the show. Tune in next week on Wednesday, and we will see you next time.